Hey guys, and welcome to Taylor Tech. Today we're going to be taking a look at this guy, which is going to be kind of the foundation for my home lab and my home environment as I get things set up here. This is a Dell R710 enterprise class server that I picked up on eBay for like, I don't know, I guess when you count all the stuff I've put in it, it's probably about 200 bucks because I had to buy a few of the pieces separately. But I've talked a few times about wanting to do a few more things here around the house with adding more stuff into this home environment, getting a Plex media server up. I want to set up a home PBX. The problem, of course, is doing all that on individual boxes means a lot of PCs, and I really don't want that many physical machines down here, not just for the noise, but also for the amount of space that they would take up and the amount of power that they would draw, which are not good things. So I decided to do something like this, which allows me to consolidate a lot of those machines down onto one bigger PC that has redundancy built in and is more fault tolerant than a machine that I'm going to build is going to be. So the specs on this guy are two, I gotta read this off, two L5520 low voltage CPUs. Those are Intel Xenons. 16 gigabytes of DDR3, a SAS6RI host bus adapter, two 300 gigabyte hard drives. Those are 2.5-inch hard drives at the front, and in addition to the 4 NICs that come on the motherboard, two 10 gigabit SFP plus NICs that I have added. Yeah, the main plan with this guy is to install a tier 1 hypervisor on it. That's a bare metal hypervisor, and then start stacking VMs inside of it to do all the different things that I want to do. So for this video, we're going to get this guy all physically set up. We're going to get Microsoft HyperV 2016 core installed on it. That's the headless hypervisor that Microsoft provides for free to anybody. And we're going to get our first VM set up and running. So the first thing you want to do is you want to get everything physically set up. You want to make sure that you check the server and ensure that nothing came loose in shipping. And also some of the components they actually removed because it's dangerous to ship them with them included. The primarily being the power supplies, which are these guys in the back. So they're one of the weightier components in it, and so they shipped these separately. It did come with 2 power supplies, which was very nice. And I'm sure the iDRAC on the front there is throwing a warning because I unplugged that guy. And also, just you do want to open it up and make sure that RAM modules didn't come loose, the HBA card didn't come loose, that kind of thing. Also, since we added 2 NICs to it with the 2 10 gigabit NICs, we do want to get those installed. So while you're at it, go ahead and kind of poke around. If you're doing this for yourself, go ahead and poke around and look at how this thing's put together. It's really kind of cool. I think it's interesting. They built the entire computer so that it can be completely disassembled and reassembled in an entirely toolless fashion. That to me is just really cool. So one of the first things I did actually was pretty much take the entire thing apart down to the motherboard tray, just so I could see how it went together and understand, if I do have to do service to it, how am I going to do that before I actually get it set up. So once you get it all set up, you do need to attach a monitor and a keyboard to it for the initial power on, unless you have an iDRAC enterprise module in yours. Mine didn't come with the enterprise license or module, so I was forced to, only got the express version, which doesn't give you the console KVM. So I did hook up a physical keyboard and one of my monitors to it, and first thing I did, went through the BIOS, went through the RAID card configuration and the iDRAC configuration, and just made sure that everything was set up the way that I needed to be set up. I got my 2 hard drives in the front there set up with RAID 0, with RAID 1, so that they're mirroring each other. I made sure that virtualization was enabled because it actually came disabled. I think that was it for the setup. Oh, I set the IP address for the iDRAC. So you want to make sure that you do all of those things. So when it comes time to install the OS, keep your keyboard and your monitor attached. When you get the ISO for HyperV, you can either burn it to a DVD or you can put it on a USB drive to install it. Now, you can't just copy it to the USB drive. You actually have to quote-unquote burn it to the USB drive and make a bootable partition on that USB drive. The easiest way to do that is with Rufus, which is a free program that will recognize most ISOs that you send it for whatever kind of operating system they are, and set up the USB drive correctly to boot to that type of operating system. It's what I used. It's very simple, very easy, and intuitive. You'll go through your normal setup process. There's nothing really that different from installing any other version of Windows, because ultimately Windows Hyper-V Server 2016 is just another version of Windows Server. So once you get it installed, we'll switch over to the desktop and screen capture, and we'll go through all of the settings that you need to set on it to get it communicating correctly with your workstation, because unless you're in an Active Directory environment with a domain controller, it is going to be a royal pain in the butt to get this thing to work with another machine on the same work group. Okay, so I've got the machine over here running. Let's see if I can. She's over there. You might be able to hear it humming in the background a little bit, but hopefully it won't be too bad. It's actually relatively quiet. I was surprised these 710s, when they're just idling, it's about as loud as your standard workstation computer. Now, if it gets cranking, it's loud. Like when you boot it, it's like, holy crap, there's a jet engine next to me. But when it's just sitting there idling, it's not very loud at all. Okay, so you've got everything physically set up and you've started the install process for Microsoft Hyper-V 2016. Once the install finishes, you'll end up on a screen very similar to this one right here. Now, something to, right now you can see, obviously, I'm connected through remote desktop. You're still going to be connected with a monitor and a keyboard at this point. I'm just doing it this way because it's easier than pointing a camera at a monitor, which never works out at all. So one of the first things you want to do is make sure that remote management is enabled. So you can do that in menu option 4. Get numlock, hello. Menu option 4. Enable remote management. This is different than 2012. A lot of the guides that you'll see for 2012 have you enable like 5 or 6 things. You just need option 1 here, enable remote management. Boom, successful. Then you can return. Once you have that done, you'll want to make sure that remote desktop is enabled, which is number 7. Just enable. Damn it, 7, enable, and then do you want to allow all clients or clients from any version? Use any version. Network level authentication is not something you'll have unless you're in an Active Directory environment, in which case you probably aren't watching this video because you know what you're doing. So allow all clients. There you go. It's enabled. Now you should be able at this point to log in using the administrator account that you set up when you started it. If you want to have another account other than the admin account which you're accessing it with, which is a good idea and you should do, then go ahead and hit option 3 before you disconnect the monitor and the keyboard. Put in the name that you want to add, blah, 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 blah. I've already added one, so I'm not going to add another one. It'll give you the option, it'll give you a pop-up window. You put in the password twice, you're good to go. Once you have those done, you can physically disconnect the monitor and the keyboard and start remote desktoping into the thing. So when you're ready to get at it from remote desktop, next steps. Actually, before you do that, you want to actually check what your IP address is for this machine so you can find it. So that's under option 8, network settings, and you'll be able to see you've got your adapters that are connected to the machine and what their IP addresses are. All right, so now we know that our IP address is this 192.168.116, which obviously that's where we're connected through. So once we have that done, we can come in, do things through remote desktop. Now, when you come back in remote desktop, there's a few commands that you're going to want to run to enable Hyper-V manager to actually connect to the machine. So one thing I have learned through this process is the authentication methodology for work groups connected networks is just crap. It's awful. It's horrible. It's a pain in the ass. You don't want to deal with it more than once or twice. If I end up setting up Active Directory at home, it'll probably be just because of how big of a pain in the ass this is. So step 1 is 2 PowerShell commands that you need to run on the server. So you can do those through command prompt. So PowerShell, and then first is enable PowerShell remoting so that you can remotely send PowerShell commands to it. Enable. I believe that the Hyper-V Manager also uses PowerShell's connectivity for part of what it does. So you do need to do this. And put it this way, I can't connect with HyperV Manager if I don't enable that. So make sure you enable it. Also, enable man dash role server. So what we're enabling is Windows Management Credentials SSP, Secure Sign-On Processor. You do need this. You're enabling this as the server role so that you can use the workgroups connectivity to the Windows Management function for workgroup connectivity to access this server. So it'll give you a pop-up saying, do you actually want to enable this? Say yes. And it'll enable it, and it'll tell you the status of everything right there. And by the way, this URL, yeah, that sucker's dead. Don't try and go there. So once you've done those things, your server is set up, you're good to go. There's a service. If you run into issues later connecting, there is a service you can check to see if it is running. Net star, I gotta exit this. God, I'm in PowerShell. So in just a regular command prompt, net start WinRM, Windows Remote Management. That is the actual service that needs to be running. This service is already running on this machine. If it's not running for you, make sure you start it. Okay, so now you're done on the server side. So once that's done, the next thing that you want to do is enable the HyperV Manager role in Windows. So go to Control Panel and Programs and Features and turn Windows features on and off. And then right here is the HyperV Manager role. Make sure that you enable that and click OK. Now, to do this, you must be using Windows Professional version. So to Windows 8.1 Professional or 2010 Professional, or Windows 10, not 2010, Windows 10 Professional. If you don't have the Pro version, then this will not be an option for you, and you can't really manage the machine remotely. That's a problem. Get yourself a Windows Pro key. Okay, so now that we got that enabled, we need to run a few more commands on the client machine here and edit some group policy to actually get this sucker to work. PowerShell, make sure you're running this as an administrator. If you're not running as admin, you won't be able to actually do it. Yes. All right, so here's our PowerShell. We have two commands we need to run. The first is set item wsman localhost. We're setting our trusted host. Here where it's, you want to put your IP address of your machine. So in our case, so that is going to set our trusted host. It's going to say that it's going to give you a warning saying, do you actually want to do this? If WinRM is not started on your client machine, it will get started by running this command. So we run that guy. The next thing we run is enabling the same thing that we ran on the server, except in the client mode. So we're enabling wsman cred SSP role client delegate computer. Again, I love PowerShell for copy paste. Hello. Fuck you. All right. And we'll get a warning and tell it yes. And then we get the same results of what our available authentication methods are. All right, so next we need to edit some group policy. Come down and search gpedit. Edit group policy. Fire that guy up. And make it so you can actually read stuff, because that's important. All right, so local computer, administrative, or no, sorry, computer. Okay, local computer, computer configuration, administrative templates, system, credential delegation. So there's a lot of stuff under here. You'll see I have two that are enabled. I actually only enabled one and it automatically enabled the other one for me. So what we want to enable is allow delegating fresh credentials with NTLM only server authentication. So we're saying delegate it to the server when the server says, yes, you can delegate to me. When you set it, you'll want to add servers to the list that are allowed to receive fresh credentials. When you add servers to the list, wsman/*. Any group, any server on the work group, just let them add. If you want to be specific, you can do wsman/ and then the server name. So if you come back to Here you've got your computer name. You can use that if you really want to. If you're on a local network behind a firewall, it shouldn't be a huge deal. You should be connecting to strange servers on your network. If there are strange servers on your network, you have another problem. Okay, so once you've got your group policy edited, we can actually fire up the Hyper-V manager. So fire up the Hyper-V manager, and you need to connect to the server. Server name in. Click connect as another user. I have never been able to get, even when adding my account with my password, I've never been able to get it to actually correctly connect. Now I'm using a Microsoft account on my Windows 10 PC at home. That may have something to do with it. I may have screwed up another setting somewhere, but I was able to get it using a account that I had created on the server that was not my account. When you enter that account name, just make sure that you enter wsman/. So you're entering this as if it was a domain account. So wsman is the domain for Windows Workgroups accounts that are not part of a domain. If you don't put a domain in front of the username, it'll say that it's a bad format and it won't accept it. So gonna be bad and connect with the admin account, and then you just put the password in. All right, I'm already connected to it though, right here. So we're already connected to it. We're fine. This is my pfSense box that I've been playing with and trying to get running. So once you're here, you should be connected to the machine. You should be able to start creating virtual machines. Before you get into that, there are a few housekeeping things you probably want to do. You'll probably want to come into Virtual Switch Manager and add some of your NICs as virtual switches so that you can connect them. It's really interesting. I've learned a lot about how these virtual switches work within Hyper-V. Essentially, the switch is built around the physical NIC. So these are externals, right? You have, okay, so back up. You have basically three types of virtual switches. You have external, internal, and private. For external virtual switches are tied to a physical NIC. Internal switches are not tied to a physical NIC, and private virtual switches are, I forget what exactly private did differently than internal. I think it was that devices that were not a part of that network were not aware of it, even if it was part of the same VLAN. Something like that. It was very kind of edge casey kind of thing that you're probably not going to need. So right now I only have external ones. If you have multiple VMs that you want to connect within the Hyper-V server and they're not really connecting outside of the Hyper-V server, you can use, of course, an internal switch. And the way the way these are set up, it's not multiple physical NICs switched together. It is each physical NIC has a virtual switch attached to it that multiple virtual machines can attach to. I was a little bit disappointed by that. I was hoping that I could just, bring all the NICs together into one virtual switch. Sadly, that is not the case. So once you have your virtual switches all set up that you're going to be using, I'm really only using this LAN right now. This is all getting prepped for setting up my pfSense box. So once you've got that set up, you are ready to actually start a VM. So what you can do, come up to New Virtual Machine and set up your VM. So we'll, let's see, what do we... already got a pfSense box running. Let's see what else I've got. Hanging out. Download. What do I got? What you got? What you got? All right. VMware. Waste of time. I don't know what it was. I could not get ESXi to install on this machine at all. It would automatically disconnect the keyboard anytime it got to the point of having to start entering things during the install process. And so I couldn't go anywhere with it. What do I want to install? We'll install gparted somewhere, because it's always good to have some disk management tools. So let's see. What I did in terms of actually getting my ISOs over to the machine is I have created an images folder on my NAS, and then I connected my machine, my server to the NAS and pulled those images files off to actually connect them, to actually use them. You don't have to do it that way. You could burn a physical disk if you wanted. All right, so we've got our ISO copied over to the network, and we can then come here. So I've already previously mapped this. CD. Not CD, stupid. All right, so now I've copied gparted over to the actual hard drive of the server. Because for some reason, Hyper-V does not like network locations for ISOs when inserting them as media. All right, so we're going over here. We're going to create a new virtual machine. We're going to name this guy gparted. Next, specify generation. When you're picking the generation, unless you have a specific reason for generation 2, pick generation 1. I've found a lot of weirdness with generation 2 when it comes to inserting media and whatnot. It really only seems to like physical media for some reason, which is stupid. Give it some memory. I'll give this guy 2 gigs. 8. Connection. It'll be connected to LAN 1. And we'll give it a physical disk. We'll say it only needs 20 gigs. Actually, gparted only needs like 5 gigs. And that's where it's going to stick the virtual hard disk. I've got, like I said, 2 300 gig drives in RAID 1 on this machine. So I'm just keeping all my virtual machines on there for now. We're going to install an operating system later. Next, gives us a little readout, and we click finish. And there's our new virtual machine in an off state. So before we fire it up, we're going to run into settings real quick, look at processors. We're going to bump that up to 2 processors. So now we can actually use 2 of the threads on the machine. And on the DVD drive, we're going to specify an image file, find our gparted that we copied over previously. All right. And let's see, just take a quick spin, make sure everything else looks good. We don't want this to restart it if something happens. Click OK, and then we can fire it up. So we're going to connect so that we can actually see the VM during the install process, and click start. Boom. All right. And then that's right, gparted doesn't install anything. It doesn't really even need hard drive. It could be like a 0 meg drive, would be fine. Well defined CPU device node. Huh, interesting. gparted doesn't like virtualization. Nope. Okay. So one thing I've noticed, Hyper-V differentiates between oops. Oh, actually it did work. I thought it was failing. Don't touch key map. Which language do you prefer? US English. Good. Which mode do you prefer? Huh. Cool. It is going to work. Hey, there's my gparted VM. Cool. And it sees nothing but the one sad little 5 gig drive. So that just gives you an idea of how quick and easy it is to spin up a VM and to get something up and running. All right, guys, and so that's how you get your first VM fired up on Microsoft Hyper-V 2016. And I'm far from done with this server, guys, when it comes to the physical side. Certainly, we're going to go through spinning up different VMs and getting a virtual home environment set up on one virtualization server. But we're probably going to end up having to add more memory to it. 16 gigs is going to be marginal for all the stuff that I want to do with it. Although I should be good with 16 threads in terms of having enough compute power to do everything. Alright guys, I hope you found this video helpful. If you did, please throw a like on it. Also, leave any comments or questions you have for me in the comment section down below. I love interacting with y'all and I love answering your questions. If If you'd like to support my channel, you can do so by using the Amazon affiliate link in the description section down below. Thanks for watching, guys. Have a good one.